You are listening to the Ready PDM Network.
This episode of Ready Product Radio is brought to you by Under 10 Consulting. Does your organization rely too often on individual heroics to get the products released? What if instead your team could systematically manage your products and services with just fewer than 10 living documents? Under 10 guides you to a minimal process with brief artifacts, simple templates, and ready-to-use worksheets. Is your product team struggling to get products into the marketplace? Then you'll want to talk to Under 10 Consulting. Get a tailor-made product playbook designed specifically for your organization.
Are you ready?
Our mission is to get the right people into the right jobs. So believe it or not, we get a lot of customers from Howard Stern. It's this most surprising thing about our business, but small business owners are in the car driving to wherever, right? It works. It is. Okay. It is all about accountability. It also is a seat at the table. The idea of building a market and to really understand what customers, I love delighting customers. Like the idea that you can, have all these problems that come at you from your market and from your customers, and then you can have them collapse in your head to a solution, and then work with a dev team to get that delivered to market, and marketing team for that matter. It's I never get tired of it.
Excellent. Hello, Ready Product Radio heads, and welcome to another exciting episode of Ready Product Radio. This week's episode features part one of a two-part discussion with Kim Phelan, VP of Product Management at ClearFit in Toronto. Ready Product Principle number 12 is always be growing. Part of that involves managing your career. In part one, Kim talks about how she got into product management and what it takes to move up the ranks to director and then VP of Product Management. Two of the most common questions I get asked at association meetings and meetup groups are, how do I get into product management? And how do I progress up the ladder once I get into the role? Kim's story provides some good insights into both of these questions. Enjoy the show. Are you ready? Kim Phelan, welcome to Ready Product Radio. You and I have known each other for a number of years, but could you introduce yourself for our audience, please?
Sure thing. Thanks for having me, Alan. I'm Kim Phelan. I'm the VP of Product at ClearFit. We are a SaaS-based software company at Yonge and Eglinton in Toronto. Our mission is to get the right people into the right jobs. That's how it starts out. Right now, we do that by helping employers find candidates for their job postings. And when they do apply, they take a survey, which is a test, which will tell them whether they'll be a good fit for the role. And we're expanding that into the whole life cycle of an employee. So how can you develop and coach that person? How can you find new opportunities for them? Let's say they could be a good sales manager from being a sales rep. So we're working towards that as we go along. ClearFit's been around for probably 6 years. I've been here for about 2.5. When I started, I was the sole product manager, and we had one developer, and that was about it. So now we're at definitely a lot bigger than that.
Excellent. So how would you characterize your target customer? A lot of times in product, we talk about things like persona.
Sure.
And prospect problems and things like that. Mm-hmm. Who would you categorize as your key personas and problems that you're trying to address for them?
Well, interestingly enough, that has changed over time. We serve these small to medium business. Mm-hmm. When I started it, I think, frankly, it was the 1 to 10 employer who didn't have HR, and they were looking to hire somebody. And, of course, they're not hiring that often, so they really want to get it right. Now we're actually moving a bit more upmarket, so I'd say 25 to 400 is our band. Okay. We don't go especially into enterprise, but we're starting to dabble in there. So I like to think of it as I'm kind of moving away from the persona to jobs to be done, only because we have so many different examples of the types of customers, but they all hire us for the same reason. So it is, I need to find somebody who will do a great job and succeed at my company, but also if I get lots of candidates, they also want us to tell us which one they should interview. And then who are the people who are actually going to succeed? And that's what ClearFit is helping them with.
Excellent. That's great. And I imagine the competition gets a little more fierce as you move up market. Are you noticing that, or?
Yeah, I mean, it's fierce all over the place. I find it interesting because early in my career, I did competitive intelligence. So, this is kind of near and dear to my heart. But the idea is that we compete against job boards, of course. We compete against Craigslist. Any place that somebody's going to post a job to get applicants. But then we also compete against digital recruiters, like whether that's a Smart Recruiter or a Resume or you name it. There's a whole bunch of them. We also compete with assessments because we are a psychometric test.
Right.
So we're competing against the People Metrics, the Predictive Index, you name it. And then we also compete against the applicant tracking systems. So it's a pretty noisy space.
Yeah, definitely.
But what ClearFit provides, its distinctive competence is the profile that you get as the candidate's profile and that match against that job. Not a lot of people are doing that.
So one of the podcasts I listened to lately is Startup, and they recently profiled a dating service.
Right, me
would
too.
Would it be okay if I drew the analogy to say that it's kind of similar in the sense that, you know, when you're trying to do an online dating service, you're trying to match two people up. Similar kind of psychometrics here of trying to say, yeah, let's try to make that more efficient.
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting because, so just to take a little tangent on that, eHarmony,
Yeah.
they just tried to get into the job finding world. So it's kind of interesting how, yes, you're right, it is like that. And we actually categorize people from strong fit to weak fit when they apply. And the employers who actually get that love it because they're like, I just interview the strong fits and they're fantastic because these people are built for the job that I'm doing, that I'm looking for.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And then last question on ClearFit, and then we'll move on. So how do you find your customers then? Do they find you? Do you find them? Is it a combination of both, perhaps?
Well, our channels are, we've been doing SEM for a while. So obviously we've got that spend with Google AdWords and Bing and you name it. We also do a lot of radio. So believe it or not, we get a lot of customers from Howard Stern. It's this most surprising thing about our business, but small business owners are in the car driving to wherever, right? It works. And now we're also moving on to more networking and whether that's events, we've been doing a lot of startup events in Toronto and also referrals from existing customers. So, but there'll be lots more to come. Our marketing team is just getting revved. So.
Yeah, no, that sounds really exciting. So what, a little bit of background on you, I find it interesting. Product people seem to come from all kinds of different backgrounds. So just to get to know you a bit better,
sure.
How did you get into product management? What path did you follow to get into it?
Right. I mean, I hear that there's people can take it as a major now, but they certainly couldn't when I started. But I started out as a marketing coordinator at a software company in Richmond Hill, which was then and now again called ChangePoint.
Okay.
I did everything. I did trade shows. I did product demos. I did proposals. I did pre-sales. Did a whole bunch of those things. And then what ended up happening is I did competitive intelligence for a year while I was there as well.
Excellent.
And then as I made product demos, I kept having all these ideas for the product and then found myself in product management. So I came at it from the pre-sales marketing sort of angle.
Yep.
And then from there, I worked at a number of different places. So I went from ChangePoint to 2Cows, which is the second largest registrar in the world for domain names, now known as Ting, if you've ever heard of Ting.
Yeah.
And so there I also, I worked on a team with a lot of product managers, which was a really interesting experience. And then from there to Achievers and now ClearFit.
Good. Excellent. So what, why have you stuck with product management? What is it that you like about it? What keeps you focused in that domain?
What's interesting is I took a couple of years off in the middle of my career to go back to school for interior decorating because I was like, I've had it with this software software game,
Yeah, career number two kind of thing.
I thought, it was my version of my midlife crisis. I wanted to try it. And it was really interesting, but what I found interesting about the design part is it was cool, and to be able to know how to put a living room together or something like that is a skill that I'm glad I have. But what I liked the best about that job was understanding the customer's problem and figuring out how we could solve it. Right. And then I stepped back and thought, hold on a second. Isn't that why I love product management? And so no matter what I do, even interior decorating, I treated it like a product. But I really found that I really do love software for that. And the idea of building a market and to really understand what customers, I love delighting customers. Like the idea that you can, have all these problems that come at you from your market and from your customers, and then you can have them collapse in your head to a solution, and then work with a dev team to get that delivered to market and marketing team for that matter. It's I never get tired of it.
Excellent. Yeah, that's great. So you're a VP now. A lot of people that are probably listening to this podcast are earlier on in their career. And a lot of times I know talking to those folks, they're thinking about, okay, what is my career path in product management? So can we start by, what do you think are the key attributes that make for a successful, say somebody transitioning from, it could be a QA role, it could be a technical documentation or pre-sales.
Yeah.
What would you say, would be a good kind of self-checklist they could go through to say, yeah, I could probably be successful in product management?
Well, I think drive is a really big one. To start there, to be driven to take on responsibilities even outside of your realm. I've seen product managers come up from all sorts of places, and it's usually the curiosity and the customer focus that they start from. Even if it's a matter of, if you're in QA or you're in, whether it's technical documentation, to get involved with the customer project and really try to understand the problems that you're trying to solve there and get lots of exposure to those problems. Product management is a generalist kind of role. You have to dabble in a whole bunch of stuff. So, that type of customer curiosity, it's not about running a good schedule for a dev team. It's not about writing good requirements. I think it is about, first and foremost, understanding the problem you're trying to solve in the business you're in. And then working through all the pieces of that. So, the more exposure you can get to all those pieces are the better. I mean, I'm a big pragmatic marketing person.
Right.
I always look at the grid. When I started, I was at the bottom of the grid, and I did a lot of whether that's sales support, pre-sales stuff, competitive intelligence, requirements. I did all the nuts and the bolts, and then as I've evolved in my career, I've moved left. If you know the grid, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. So, but it's trying to get the pieces of that. Even when I spent a year in competitive intelligence, I don't think that is a job anymore, but it was a cool thing to do at the time. But that was a great piece of product, right? Understanding how everybody attacks a market differently, things along those lines.
Yeah, and I don't know about you, but I know I see a lot of gravitational force too, especially if somebody's been in an organization for a long time. You tend to take, I think Steve Johnson, you mentioned pragmatic, uses the term inside-out thinking. So what do you suggest for younger people that earlier in their career to switch that over? Because you're very much an outside-in thinker now, I assume. So how do you make that switch from being kind of thinking about the inside the product to thinking about the customer? What are some of the key things?
Well, it's interesting because that's actually how I would delineate a good product manager from a bad one. And I think people get caught up in the idea that working with the dev team and delivering product is what product management is about. And yes, it's an important piece of that process, but you have to, if you don't start out, you're going to fail because you're not building something that somebody actually needs. So from that perspective, how do you switch your perspective? I mean, ask and volunteer to go on customer calls. Listen in on when your customer support team is talking to customers. We've got a double headset thing here at ClearFit where you can listen to what customers are saying. Enlightening. But even just, even having customer conversations in any way, people are always happy to have a ride along with, whether it's a customer visit or a webinar or anything along those lines.
So one thing I've seen, and I'd like your viewpoint on this, is a lot of MBA graduates come out of their MBA and they say, okay, I'm going to apply for a job as a product manager. I'm guessing from what you're saying that you would instead coach those people, probably do some other customer facing role, whether it's sales or customer support or
or even just
fair,
or even start whether it's a product analyst or something like that to start dabbling in those pieces. I don't see, it's interesting because I've been doing a lot of product management hiring in the last year or so, and I don't see a lot of people who start as associates anymore. It's a role that's a little gone to the wayside. I think organizations are just getting leaner. But if there was an opportunity to do that, that would be great, to take some responsibility with someone mentoring. Because the thing about the MBA thing is that product management is a bit of a trial by fire job. The only reason that I know how to deal with an X project is because I went through that project 10 years ago or 5 years ago or whatever it may be.
Yeah, and I find a lot of them are I think the term's quants. A lot of them come out as quants because that's what the schools teach them.
Right.
But like you say, that doesn't tell you much about customers. You have to get out there and talk to them.
Right. Well, and it's interesting because even in this role, I've used data more in this role than I have ever used in my career because people are getting much more data focused.
Yeah.
I didn't do A/B testing until I got to ClearFit,
Right.
and there's a lot more of that being taught in school, but you have to balance between all of those. There's the customer needs, there's your intuition, there's your how do you get it done, and
Right.
what does the data have to say?
Yeah,
So,
excellent.
yeah.
Yeah, good. So what? Just going back to your experience then. So you've been you're a VP now. You've been doing product management for what, about maybe 10 or 15 years?
15, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was at ChangePoint for 6 years, and I went from marketing associate, competitive analyst to an associate product manager. That product was wide, so in that way we had one head product manager.
Yeah.
In today's world, it would probably be two product managers and a director in that case. And then from there, I went to run a business line at 2 Cows, and then I ran 3 business lines, and then had some associates, and then started running that department. How I did it is I just kept on taking more responsibility, and putting my hand up and saying I want that project. That's how I did it, and flexing with whatever is happening inside the company. And then when I went to Achievers, the same thing. I started as a director there, and then when I came to ClearFit, I was at a failed startup in between. We won't talk about that one, but. It was one of those ones that was trying to get off the ground, didn't quite make it. But coming to ClearFit, I started out as head of product, and then because ClearFit had never had a product manager before, they had no idea what that meant. And then in the 2.5 years that I've been here, we've grown the product team, and I now run development and product management.
Yeah, so for the younger product managers or product manager wannabes, so 15 years, that sounds about right to me with other people I've talked to. Now, what can you talk about as well about the intervening roles then? So you mentioned, continuously taking on more responsibilities. What does a product director have to do, or what are the key skills that are maybe different than product management? Like, are you still focused on all of those things, but now you're coaching others, or?
Yeah, you have to take a bigger. So, being a director at 2 Cows was interesting because we had at the time 8 product lines. So that was domains, it was domain digital certificates, it was a whole bunch of other things, email, anti-spam, and the role at that point was to make sure that everybody was rowing in the same direction, and to really own the product strategy. So as I mentioned, going left on the grid.
Right.
It's interesting because as a individual contributor, as a product manager, you're all about the whether that's the releases, the profitability, or you are very much tactical. You own your roadmap, I hope, but that's definitely, every organization is a little bit different about how they slice it, but it was that type of idea that not only where there might be, in my case, the 8 product lines, but how do you get everybody rowing in the same direction? How do you look to the longer strategy and start making sure that everybody is kind of contributing their pieces for the overall company direction?
Right.
And then you also become a conduit to change too. Like when I was at 2 Cows, we transitioned from waterfall to agile, and I was a key part of that. It was great. But 2 Cows was falling up behind. People like GoDaddy were eating them for lunch from a perspective of how quickly they were releasing product. So I was
those
part
politically incorrect ads that they were doing were
it was
obviously
working for them. And didn't they stop those lately? I think so. Totally. But that's exactly it. So it was, instead of just sole product and feature based stuff, it was like, okay, how do we make this organization run faster?
Okay.
And so I've been doing that here too, and that's where the difference is. It's interesting because right now I'm down a product manager, so I'm doing their job, and I have to get into so what do I do about this feature, write the requirements, and then at the same time I'm saying, all right, so my budgeting for the staffing and the this and the and the product strategy is going to change. So it's about having the 10,000 foot view and the 1,000 foot view.
Yeah.
But as you move your way up, it's about the purview of that role.
Yeah. And you're basically just looking at a broader horizon.
And a longer horizon.
And a longer horizon. Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because, when I especially with Agile, you do, whether that's a week sprint, 2-week sprints, you can be very short-term focused, but you have to always be looking about what are we trying to do with this product? What does this quarter look like? And I'm now looking out 2 years and saying, all right, so what are we going to be when we grow up? And how do we make sure that we can set ourselves up to succeed?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So and I want to talk more about Agile in a second, but just to finish the career progression piece then. So when you go from director to VP, I guess one answer would be those horizons just get longer, they get broader, but I imagine is there some more accountability too, like in terms of revenue, in terms of company performance, or what would you say would be the big things between making the jump from director to VP, for example?
Right. It is.
Okay.
It is all about accountability. It also is a seat at the table. This is the thing that I was very important to me coming to ClearFit, which says, okay, so we have a senior leadership team who's in charge of product delivery, marketing, of sales. That is my piece. We don't have a VP of engineering at ClearFit. Right. I do both roles.
Okay.
And the idea here is that my teams run like we deliver product.
Right.
And so that is every piece of that, which says we've got the following commitments to our board. We want to get cash flow positive by X date. We want to do all so you're
at the table with those decisions.
Yeah. And one of the things that I've learned in the last year as well is that I'm a leader of the company, not just the leader of the product. And it's a mind shift that I like it. I'm just saying it was just an interesting thing to step out of product and then say, and by the way, how do we make ClearFit better? Yeah. I mean, it's a pretty great place to work, but we have to work at it and continually be pushing ClearFit beyond. And that's not a product thing.
Yeah, for sure.
It's about the purview. It's not just about product anymore.
Yeah, excellent. Good. Well, Kim, I'd like to thank you for being on the podcast. Really appreciate it, and best of luck with ClearFit.
Thank you, sir.
I hope everything goes well.
Awesome.
Okay, take care.
Thanks. Bye.
Today's episode was brought to you by Under 10 Consulting. Get your product teams up to speed quickly. Leverage the latest methods and a proven process designed specifically for your organization. Under 10 Consulting. Manage the business of your products.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Ready Product Radio, part of the Ready PDM network. This is when most podcasters ask you to leave a review on iTunes if you like the show. My only request is if you found the show entertaining, inspiring, or informative, please share it with a colleague or friend who may feel the same way. Also, note that the views expressed in this episode do not necessarily reflect my views or the views of the Ready PDM network. If you want yourself or your product to be ready, then keep your eyes on your markets, your ears to your customers, your mind on their experiences, both good and bad, and finally keep your hearts in your products. Until next time, thank you for listening. You can contact us on Twitter at Ready Product Radio. That's RDYPRODUCTRADIO. And on the web at www.readyproductradio.com.
Tuesday, what do you want to do tonight?
The same thing we do every night, Pinky. Try to take over the world.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.